if the eyelids went the other way. Okay.
Good to luck, everybody. Today's broadcast is sponsored by Rabbi Vromi Friedberg.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep.
And that's to celebrate the simcha, of his son getting engaged, and to daven for a schus for everybody's hatzlacha. Did I get that right?
Yep.
My uncle Yaakov Fish, his name is Yaakov in Italea. He just had cardiac arrest, and he's actually in emergency surgery right now. So our learning should also be a schus for him to have a refuah.
Where does he live?
Where does he live?
Yeah.
He lives in Williamsburg. But for the last 8 weeks, he lived in the hospital. He was doing very well. He was really getting better. And then this was a shock for us tonight. So Hashem should help that he should have a refuah shalom.
You mention his name? You say his
Yaakov
name.
V'Gentilea. He's one of the people on the list. If you listen to Rabbi Lowe's Mishaberach, every time we have a Zoom meeting, he's on the list there. Okay, let's see the Gemara. We are up to Mayim. So we've been discussing how much is too much. I titled the shir on YouTube, How Much Blood is Enough Blood? Because that's a big part of our discussion today. So we're talking about when you carry out mashkin, how much mashkin is the threshold that would trigger an Isser itself. So we just discussed oil, and we discussed how much oil it has to be, and the maskana of the Gemara is it's enough oil to smear the pinky of a newborn baby, which is very, very little oil. Now we're going to discuss how much water you'd have to carry out. Zok the Gemara, Mayim. Now I just want to remind ourselves, Revius is one number that comes up as a default for all mashkin, but then there were shiurim given for individual cases where even less than the Revius would also have enough of a cheshivas to be an object that if you carry it out on Shabbos, over itself. We also had the machlokes between Reb Shimon and the Tanakam in our Mishnah, if the lower shiurim are the bare minimum, and anything above that, everybody's chayav for, or if a revius is what everyone's chayav for, and a bare minimum is the things listed in the Mishnah, and below that there wouldn't be a chayav at all. That was the original machlokes we had with Reb Shimon in the Mishnah. So let's see what water is. Water in Mayim is kedei loshuf v'henes akila. Enough water to mix with the powder to create this paste that you're going to use to put on a wound, a salve for a wound. Amar Abaye, Michti, let's think about this for a second. Kol milsa the shikha v'lo shikha. When we're talking about making shiurim, we have to analyze the different uses of every specific product. So there's the standard use for the product, and then there's certain uses for the product that aren't typical, but also are a use for that product. So the question is, when you're making the assessment as to how much of that product is enough to trigger an Israel Tzah, do you look at its common use, or do you look at something that's it's used for even occasion? So Abaye says, if you have a common use for it and not a common use for it, also Rabbanan Basher the Shchicha Lakula, meaning if I have the common use of it requires a revius, and a not common use of it, an occasional use of the same substance is half a revius, we'll go Lakula and we'll say it's a full revius. And when it comes to carrying, the more you need, the more kuladik it is. Because you're saying anything less than that threshold does not trigger an Isra itself. Now, so if it's shchicha v'lo shchicha, you'll follow the most common use, l'kula. Shchicha or shchicha, let's say their both uses are equal. The use that requires a share of revius and the use that requires much less than the revius. Let's say they're both very common. Then also Rabbanan, basar de shchicha l'chum. Then we have to say that the use, which only requires a small amount, will create a cheshivas of this product, and therefore, if you carried out that smaller amount, you would be chayav for itself.
What about loish shchicha l'kula?
Well, even if it's shchicha, you go l'chumer. So kol shekain, if it's shchicha no shchicha l'kula, kol shekain you go l'chumer.
You only so you're only going lakula if it's shchicha. What happens if the loy shchicha is lakula?
Then for sure you wouldn't go based on shchicha. When you're looking at an item and you want to assess how much of it is chashuv, so you look at its primary use. If it has two primary uses, you have to go to chumrah. But if it has a primary use that's lakula and a less often used that's a chumrah, then you'll go lakula to the primary use. You're asking me, what if my primary use would create a chumrah?
Right.
And then for sure you go to chumrah, because even if they're used equally in large amounts,
So it's not such a
amounts,
chiddush. It's not such a chiddush that shchicha lakula you go lakula.
correct. It's just a fact.
It would have been a bigger chiddush. It would have been a bigger chiddush to tell us that even when it's the loy shchicha one is lakula, we go bust to that.
But we don't. But that wouldn't be true. But the Gemara is not coming to say, Abai is not coming to say a chiddush over here. He's coming to pose a kasha. So first Abai is trying to clarify what are the rules of the game. The rules of the game are, when you assess it, if the most common use of it requires a lot, then you could be samich on that lakula. But if the most common use of it is equal to another most common use, then you always go to chumrah. So Abai is saying you always go to chumrah unless the most common use of something would say you need a big quantity, and only once in a while it's possible to be used as a lower quantity. Only then would we be makel and say that you are allowed to carry up until the point where it's this larger amount. So yayin, for instance, the primary thing that people use wine for will be to drink. And when they drink a revius. It's not that common that we would use wine for refuah. And Rashi gives an example. This use that we have for water, what if you used wine for it? Sometimes people use wine for it, but it's not that common. Even if you could technically mix wine with that powder to create the paste. There are people who do it with the milk of a woman, or there are people who do it with water. But the chosna yayin shadam of yikarim. They're not going to only use wine because wine is very expensive. Why waste good wine on making a salve out of it? You're much better off drinking it. Hilchach ozul basher shtiyosai. Therefore, we'll say that when we assess how much wine you need to carry in order to be over the Israel, we said it's mizigas kois because that's the larger share, which is the most common use of wine. The avagav delakula. Even though by saying that wine you're only over when you have the mizigas kois, which you said was a quarter of a revius, that's a very big share compared to the small amount of wine that you would use to mix it to make this paste. Milk you can also drink, veloshev kilar, and also mix it to make this paste. But that's not what you do with milk, the most common. Since water is also a good way to mix the paste, you'll use the least expensive beverage, which will be water. Therefore, by milk as well. You go by the which is a larger shear than the shear that would be required to mix with this powder. So the two examples of items where you could use it for a salve, you could use it to mix with the powder to make a paste, and then you would use very little of it. But more often than that, the vast majority of people who use milk and wine are to drink. Therefore, we say that they're not choshev, the creator Israel, until you have the larger amount. So let's see what it says over here. Yayin shtiyasa shchicha, refuasa shchicha. Therefore, also rabbanim basa shtiyasa. The shchicha, l'kula, chalav achilas shchicha, refuasa shchicha. People aren't going to waste milk to mix it with the powder to create a shmear. Therefore, again, also rabbanim basa achilas l'kula. But dvash, honey, achilas shchicha, and refuasa shchicha. Honey is used equally to eat as it is used to rub on the camels. So they're both of the uses for honey are equally weighted. Since they're equally weighted, you have to go l'chumrah. Also, l'chumrah, because that's also a very prominent use of dvash. Therefore, the lesser amount, not how much dvash you would eat in a serving, but rather how much devash you would smear on a wound or on a irritated part of the animal's skin, that's the smallest shear, and we're mechayiv someone for it, so even with that small shear. And that takes us to the main focus of Abaye's comments. It wasn't to talk about a chiddush, it was to set up the ground rules. Now that we have the ground rules, Abaye, let's see how that works out by water. Elamayim, michti, let's see. Shtiyos shchicha. Refuah shelo shchicha. The most common use of water is to drink, not to use as a refuah. So, Frek Abaye, my timer, also rabbanon basar refuah shelo chumrah. Why are they being so machmir and saying that even a tiny drop of water that you mix with this powder, even that's usher, but that's not how water is most often used. Water is most often drank. Zok Rashi, Rufuasa lo shchicha, so Rashi sharei shar mashkin rulakach. Rashi's kashi is, I don't understand something. The fact of the matter is that the most common way to make this shmir is with water. So what do you mean refuah lo shchicha? Anytime anybody makes a refuah, they actually use water. Zok Rashi sharei shar mashkin rulakach. The fact of the matter is you could make this salve with other mashkin, with milk or wine. V'yesh shaven kilar b'shar mashkin. But nevertheless, people do use other mashkin for this purpose. Ushtiyos shchicha, and it's very common to drink water. Shirov shtiyas mayim hein. Most drinking water, most of the use of water is to drink. If you think about it, it's drinking water is much more prominent than drinking wine, because water we drink all the time. Wine we only drink when we want to have an enhanced drink for the Suda, but our normal drinking is drinking water. People don't walk around with bottles of wine. People walk around all day with bottles of water. Water is what we drink the most. So why is it that by water we're being machmer to say that even a small little amount of water that you would mix to make a paste, even that's usher? That's the Gemara challenge. Amar Abaye, Dr. Abaye, I'll tell you the answer, because the Galila Shanu, we're in Galila. What's the difference in Galil? It's Rashi, Shehein Anin. In Galil, they're very poor. Umakpidin v'dover mut. And they're makpid on every little thing. V'chasin al yayin v'chalav loshev kitila. They would never use wine or milk to mix in to make a salve for a wound. And therefore, v'ein shafin el b'mayim. They only use water for that. It's not like sometimes they'll use it for this and sometimes they'll use it for that, like Rashi explained earlier. In Galil, they are so poor, no one in their right mind would ever even contemplate using anything else for this purpose other than water. So since water is used exclusively to make this paste, or since to make this paste they will only exclusively use water, that makes it a prominent use of water, and that in Galil, and that's why in Galil, even that little bit will be usher to walk out with. So right away you see that even though some shiurim are halacha l'moshe like the shiur groigris for carrying out food, you see that there was no specified prescriptive halacha l'moshe, and rather it depends on each area how choshev it is. That was Abaye's case. Rav Amar, afilu teva b'shar mekaymes. Even in other places where they actually do use sometimes wine or sometimes milk to make this paste, but it's going like Shmuel, Kiddush Shmuel. Amar Shmuel, kol shekiani masu. All different types of drinks, liquids that you would mix with the salvo to put this, I think it was put on their eye, it would heal it. But the problem is umatalali. When it finished healing, it would also form a crust that would block the eye. So it's not the greatest way to do it. Levar mimaya the massive metallic. Water, when you made this paste out of water, it would heal the eye and it wouldn't leave any residue, which wouldn't cause someone to lose their sight temporarily. So that was definitely the prominent way to do it. And since it was a very prominent way to make this type of schmear, water, it's called a major use for water. And since it's called a major use for water, water will be usher even in that small quantity. So again, water, even for a very small quantity, there'll be a chiyuv havitzah. The Shar Kalamashkin Bervies. Now, before we learn this, I just want to review quickly the Mishnah, just to refresh our memories about what the Mishnah said. Being that we are learning the explanation of the Mishnah, it makes sense to see what the Mishnah says. So the Mishnah says over here, Motzoei Kedei Mizigas Kais, which we learned already, and we learned Cholav Kedei Gemiyah. The Vash we learned Kedei Litnul HaKasis. Shem Kedei Losach Ever we learned that as well. The reason for that, and Mayim Kedei Losach Ben Ezekilar. That's what we just learned now, and that's because primarily the only type of liquids that were used for this kilar was water, according to Shmuel, and Abaye's shot was we're speaking in Galil where they never used anything else to make this. Now we're up to Bishar Kalamashkin Revius. All other mashkin not listed in the Mishnah, not itemized in the Mishnah, you need to carry Revius to create Isser. That's number one. Number two is V'chol HaShoyvchim Revius. Any bad water, Rashi's Mayim Sruchim, smelly water, any smelly water this year is a Revius. Rav Shimon Omer, Kulam Revius, they're all Revius. And we learned what that means as well. But Rav Shimon said that all of these shiurim are only for people, really everybody, a Revius is this year. People who are machshir, even smaller amounts, they will, for those people, this will also be a shear. But less than this, for nobody would it be a shear. And of course, Tanakama holds that this is the bare minimum, but less than this, if you put them away, even less than these shiurim, and your machshir, even less than these shiurim, and in fact would also be an Isser itself. That was one of the machloiks between Shimon and the Tanakama. So now we're going to be focusing on the Shakal Mashma Revius and Shoyvchim Revius. So let's have a look at that. Zok Heilige Gemara. The Shakal Mashma Revius. Tell about Dam, blood, the Chol Mini Mashkin, and all other Mashkin, the Revius, the shear is Revius. Now, there are those who ask, what do you mean Dam, the shear is Revius? Nobody drinks Dam. You're not allowed to drink Dam. So the shear maybe should be a Mashu, because even a Mashu is also. So the Mefarshim answer that who drinks Dam? Goyim. And their serving size for Goyim is Revius. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Dam, what is the shear of Dam? It's not a Revius, it's much, much less. It's Kedei Likhel Be'inachas. It's if you wanted to put on eyeshadow on one eye, the amount of blood that you would use as eyeshadow. Shekain Koichlin Lebirkis. The Rakis, let me see how this word is pronounced. I didn't look at the pronunciation of the word. Shekain Koichlin Lebirkis. What is Virkis? Rashi's Virkis is if somebody has like a protruding pimple, mylish or beletus ba'ayin, some pimple that's sticking out of the eye, they would cover it with this red blood to make it blend in or to make it feel better. So you see that this is a use of blood, and therefore even this small amount will be used. Umayninu, what type of dam would they use when they're trying to heal this eye issue, where there's things popping out of the eye, a pimple popping out of the eye? Dama the tana doilis bura. They would use the blood of a wild hen. A wild hen, not something that was domesticated, but a wild hen. Bra means outside, meaning it's not domesticated in your house, it's wild, it's out in the field. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, dam, blood, kedei likhro be'ayin achas, also the same shear that Shimon ben Elazar said, but he described a different use for blood, that shekin koichlin li'arud. They would use it to rub on li'arud. Rashi's li'arid is that some touch it as cataracts. Rashi says tavlu, which some say it's cataracts, but Rashi says tipo is daka shaloibin, the little dots of white hanoildus ba'ayin that show up in the eye. So I'm not sure what the medical explanation of cataracts are, but it's some issue in the eye. But the main point is it doesn't protrude from the eye. It's something that's on the surface of the eye that doesn't stick out. Umaynu, what type of blood would they use to heal that? Dama de Krishtina, the blood of Krishtina. Rashi's atleif. He touches it. The atleif is some type of bird because it's listed in the kosher bird, in the non-kosher birds. And Rashi, the article touches atleif as he touches a karagat, and he says atleif is the blood of a mole. So I'm not sure exactly what this mole is. But it's that. Anyway, don't try this at home regardless.
Well, a atlif is a bat.
It's a bat?
Yeah,
Oh.
we had it in the parsha.
The Maimer Muskar. So I'm not sure what a mole is. Is a mole a type of bat?
It's Atalef, it's pronounced, right?
Mole is a
Atalef.
small-
Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly what it, but don't try it at home. Anyway, the Simonech, and how do you know which animal's blood is a good refuah for which condition? Gav legava, inside for the inside. So I guess a bat was inside legava for a chayli on the eye. A chayli Rashi's gavas Christina Motzoei b'soich hayishu. It was an animal that was found in the yishuv, I guess like our raccoons and our skunks. It's an animal that lives very much amongst us, and therefore legava it would be for an eye condition that was internal to the eye, that it didn't stick out. It didn't stick out, and bara, a tarnagel that's a wild tarnagel that's on the outside, the bara will help as a refuah for a condition in the eye that protrudes. Okay, so that's what we have so far. The Mishnah says the mashkin b'revius, and we have Bar Plukta who says that the use for dam could even be much less, and even something much less will be usher to carry. When is all this said? B'moitzi, with someone who's carrying something out. If he's not taking it out, he's just hiding it, he's putting it away. It's something that he's machshiv, it's something that he values. Kol shu chayiv, even a kol shu is chayiv. So of course, at face value, this makes no sense because only haitzah is usher. Merely valuing something and putting something away that you consider valuable, even though nobody else considers it valuable, where's the isser? So this line is going to require explanation. When do we say it's usher? B'matzniya. But if you take it out, you're only chayiv with the reviews. Umoidim chachamim Rab Shimon, and the chachamim moed Rab Shimon, the mochi shoyvchin Rishus Harabim, if you carry out dirty water to Rishus Harabim, sheshiyurim b'revius, that the shear is revius. So this brayso needs explanation, and now we're going to have that explanation. Amar, let's analyze the brayso we just did. Bamed dvor mamur, when do we say that these are usher? B'moitzi, that's someone who's carrying it out. Avol b'matzniya, kol shu will be usher. In fact, tomorrow I don't understand. If he values these things, there's no chiyuv unless he actually took one of those things and carried it from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabban. So the lashon doesn't really make sense. Amar Abaye, hacha b'may askinan, b'talmid she'amar lo rabbi, a talmid whose Rebbe told him. And Rashi says we're not talking about a talmid in Torah. We're talking about an apprentice. And Rashi says specifically a carpenter's apprentice. So we're speaking about an apprentice who works for his Rebbe, so that means there's a very close and tight connection. Sha'amalei Rabbi, his Rebbe told him, Leich upnei li hamokam masuda. Clear out this place in my house so that I can have a suda there. Holach upanaloi, and he went and took everything out from the Rishus HaYachid, where his Rebbe asked him to clear, and he put things into Rishus HaRabban. So dover choshev lakol, anything that he took out that was choshev for everybody considers it a double choshev. Chayiv iluya. The Talmud will be chayiv for being moitzim mishus l'shus. Davar she'ein choshev l'chol, but something that's not choshev l'chol, for instance, it's less than these quantities that the Mishnah lists off. Iatzne Rabbi, if his Rebbe was machshav them and he put them aside because to him they were valuable, then mechayiv iluya, then he will be chayiv for it. The loy mechayiv. But if not, if these things weren't set aside by his Rebbe, then he wouldn't be mechayiv. So this needs a lot of explanation over here. So let's look at this again. What was the lashon? B'medvarim b'moitzi, avu b'matzniya kol shahu. So that means we're speaking about a Rebbe who told his Talmud to take stuff out. So anything that he takes out as davar chashuv, that's b'moitzi. Anything that he takes out, whether his Rebbe gives it a particular value or not, but it is the right shear. So b'moitzi means that all his das was to take it out. There was no focus on giving something as cheshivas. So that's right. It's davar chashuv l'koil. But the matzniya, if it's only chashuv because he was matzniya it, then even though his Rebbe is chayiv on it. I'm sorry. Then if his Rebbe is machshav it, it's chayiv. And if his Rebbe was not machshav it, it's not machshav. So Rashi explains. This is what the Brisa means to say. When did the Brisa say? Where did the Mishnah say that you needed a shear that's significant? What does the word moitzi mean? The only thing you have to go on is the mere fact that this person, took it out from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. All we have here is this person who took something from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. And therefore, if that's all you have, then it's all based on whether or not it's considered a davar chashuv in the world. Al b'matzniya, meaning b'davar sheyesh lach leilach achem achshava shel matzniya. But if you're looking at something where you have to focus on what the matzniya himself, the person who saved it, what he thinks about it, kagoyna matzniya kolshu. For instance, someone who would even save and value even a drop of things, chayiv zeh hamoitzioi, then the person who takes it out will be chayiv. Now, before we go on, we have to just analyze something. So what it's saying is that what is subject to all the shurim, that's something that you didn't give any special chashivas to. You just took it out, and therefore, if it's chashav l'kol, you'll be chayiv. But if it wasn't chashav l'kol, you won't be chayiv. But if there was a special machshava from his Rebbe to say that this smaller quantity has value, then the Talmud will be chayiv for taking it out. Now, why is this significant? Because we actually had a couple of blot ago a machloikis. It was in the last parak. We actually had the Gemara. It was said that there's actually a machloikis between a Shimon ben Elazar and the Chachamim, and the machloikis was as follows: the Chachamim said in the Mishnah that if I'm machshav less than the normal shear, then if I take it out, I'm chayiv. But if somebody else takes it out, they're not chayiv. So, for instance, I'm machshav a half a revius of dam with the shear revius. So if I personally take a half a revius dam and I take it from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, I'm going to be chayiv. But what if a kiva comes into my house and takes that half a revius dam that belongs to me and carries it out? He's not chayiv because to him it's worthless. Rav Shimon ben Elazar argues and said, since I was machshavit, anybody who goes into my house and takes it out, they'll be chayiv too on my blood. Now, on their own blood, they won't be mechoyev unless they took a shear. But since I'm machshav my blood, now my blood has a cheshivus for anybody who might carry it. So
wasn't this the same machlekes we had with salt?
Yeah, we have. I don't remember what it was regarding. We had it with other.
We had it with salt. It's the chart from two pages ago. It was
That's right.
Baba Kama, Reb Shimon. It was the
That's
same
right.
thing,
That's
right?
Exactly what it was. That's correct. Let me bring it up. Let me actually bring it up so we can actually look at it. It was this stored item. So let's see what it's talking about. So the Gemara is V'chol she'ein kosher latzniya. So let's see the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, V'oid klal acher amru kol kosher latzniya. This is not talking about food items. It was not salt. This was not even talking about food items. It could have been talking about building materials. Anything that typically people save, if it's something that most people don't give value to, most people don't give value to it, but so the Tanna Kama says, if you yourself are machshav, a small piece of 2x4 that nobody else would be machshav, they throw it in the garbage, if you carried that 2x4 out, you'd be chayiv. But if somebody else carried your 2x4 out, they won't be chayiv. On that, the Gemara said, Rav Shimon ben Elazar argues, and the Gemara tells us, the Tanya Klalam Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Kol she'ein kosher latzniya v'emetnin kamoyu v'hoch shlozev v'tzniya uva'acher v'oitziyai nischayiv zev v'machshava shlozev. So if I'm machshav a small piece of 2x4, if I'm personally machshav a 2x4 and I put it away in my house, even if you come and take it, you'll be chayiv because you took something that I gave a chashivas to. So in our Gemara, what are we saying? We're saying that this Talmud, he's not machshav this little nourisher thing that its Rebbe was machshav. Yet we're saying that the Talmud carrying it out will be chayiv. So Rashi concludes because of that this must be going according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, because it's only Reb Shimon ben Elazar who holds that I'm chayiv for taking something out, even though I'm not machshav it, but since it's your thing and you're machshav it, I'm chayiv for taking it out. That's how Rashi learns. But Tosfos wants to say that our Gemara here could even be going according to the Chachamim, because it's not just speaking about a regular relationship. It's speaking about a very special, close relationship between a Talmud and a Rebbe, someone who's teaching a parnasa. He's the apprentice. So he is very much bottled to his Rebbe, and he's doing things for his Rebbe. There's a very big difference between if a kiva comes into my house and takes out a small piece of 2x4 because he wants to take it for himself, nothing to do with me, or if it's an apprentice doing it for the Rebbe under the guidance and under the command of the Rebbe, or he's doing it for his Rebbe, that's much worse. And there's a Tosfos, everybody would agree that the person taking it out would be chayiv, because he's not doing it for himself, he's doing it on behalf of his Rebbe, and his Rebbe for sure is makbid that this is a davar choshev by him. So that's the machlokes pshat in this Gemara. Omar Mar. Moedim chachamim to Reb Shimon. The chachamim are moeda to Reb Shimon. So I'm just playing with my screen a little bit. Moedim chachamim to Reb Shimon. B'moichi shoypkin, if you took out dirty water, the shusarabim, sheshiurim b'revius, that would have the shear of the revius. That's what it says in our Mishnah. But we're not quoting our Mishnah. It's Omar Mar, so we're quoting the Brisa. Moedim chachamim Reb Shimon, the moichi shoypkin, the shusarabim sheshiurim b'revius. Correct the Gemara, shoypkin l'may chazu. What good are shoypkin for? So Tosfos asks, why is it that the Gemara here is asking a kasha on the Brisa? Why doesn't the Gemara ask a kasha on the Mishnah that says the same thing? So we'll get to Tosfos in a second, but the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yirmiyah, you know what I could do with dirty water? Legabel bahen esatit. I can use it to mix cement with. And how much do I need? How much water is the minimum amount of water that I would use to mix with cement? A revius. Correct the Gemara, that doesn't make sense. Because Vatanya, tit, kidei lasos bahen pikur. The amount of tit that we consider a significant amount is a tiny little bit, enough that you would cover a little jug with. So the amount of tit that you would make with a revius of water is way more than that. So the question that the Gemara is asking is if a much smaller quantity of tit is considered something choshev, so then the water to make that much smaller quantity of tit should also be choshev, because it's a choshev use. It's to use it to make a piece of tit to cover the hole. So there's a very big difference. If you already have tit, a tiny little bit of tit is valuable because I can use it to cover the hole of a jug. But if I have to make tit, no one would ever make tit in such a small quantity, just enough to cover over the pikur. I'm only going to make tit if I could mix a significant amount. And that means if I would need a revius of water and the corresponding amount of concrete powder. Nobody's going to make tit just for a little bit of amount. What they'll do is they'll make a much larger amount, and they'll use part of it for tit, and then use the rest of it for other things. Therefore, if you have water, it's not going to have a chashivas, even like I've been making tit, because nobody would use less than a revius of water when they were making tit. Now we have to deal with the problem of why the Gemara only challenges the Brisa when our Mishnah seems to say exactly the same thing. So let's have a look-see. For some reason, the Gemara is only asking the question of the Brisa. Literally, what's going on in the Brisa. The problem is, the Gemara asks the same question. So why is it that? Should the shoyfin the masnisin, the shoyfin that our Mishnah was talking about, equal memar the chazu the kamed. It has many uses, such as lirchotz behem koises ukairos the loy meisik kulahai. It's not so disgusting. Using dirty water gray water to wash dishes, that's not so bad, and therefore they'll use it. The water that you're washing your dishes with might not be good to drink, but they're still going to be good to wash dishes, and that's why it uses the shear of Revius, and the Gemara doesn't challenge it. What are we comparing? In what list is this case of shayfin? It's a list that's talking about blood. That's much more disgusting. The me'isi tuah, they're very disgusting. And therefore the Gemara asks, really, really dirty water that's so dirty you wouldn't even dream of washing dishes in, what's that water good for? And that's why the Gemara had to come on to Lagabel as a tip. But in the Mishnah, that wasn't an issue, because we knew that you could use it to wash dishes with. Now it's interesting, Rabbi Elephant spoke out, and Rabbi Elephant spoke out something very interesting. That is, if you walked in to someone's house and you saw them washing dishes with water that they took out of the tanks of their toilets, you would probably say, thank you very much, I'm really not hungry tonight. And you're probably not going to join them for dinner because it's disgusting. So if it's about the shaksu to use it for that, why is it that Tosha says that would be a legitimate use? So he answers this is the reason why you don't sit at a table at a restaurant inside the kitchen, because what you don't know will not hurt you. And since when you walk in someone's house and you see them washing, you can't tell what type of water it is. There's no balta shaksu if you don't know. So if there's something that had you known how disgusting it was, if you would know how disgusting it is, the food that they're preparing in the restaurant and it's on the floor and it's filthy, but when they come out on the plate with it, it looks so wonderful, that's not a problem with balta shaksu. Even though technically, if you knew what happened to it, you would be repulsed, but if you don't know, it's not called balta shaksu. And there was actually negei halacha l'maaseh with the case of Reb Moshe. They asked Reb Moshe Shiloh, there was a butcher that would soak the liver. Now, liver, when it's sold in the olden days, now we only buy roasted liver, but in the olden days you could buy raw liver from a butcher, and of course you had to barbecue it, you had to roast it. So what the butchers would do is they wanted the liver to look good, so they would soak the liver in blood, so it had a nice red color to it, which was a color that I guess people liked. But if you would walk in and see your meat soaked in blood, you would be disgusted by it. So the shaila was, would there be an isser about the shaksu, and do we need to stop the butchers from engaging in this practice? And the Moshe said, what they don't know won't hurt them, and therefore there's no problem, you can actually do that. The butchers were allowed to soak their livers in blood. I remember we once, when I was taking a rabbinical training course at Lakewood Offord, so one of the sessions was we did a tour of the New York Hilton of their kosher kitchen. And I remember seeing, whenever you see them walk with those room service trays down the corridor in these fancy hotels, it's gorgeous and it's fancy and it's decorated, it's wow. Well, I was in the kitchen that they prepared those in. And I don't even want to say on YouTube what I saw. There's enough exposés. I'm not looking to do like a Fifth Estate expose on hotels. But needless to say, they're not as scrumptious and as luscious and as appetizing anymore to me. Because once you see what goes on behind the scenes, it's more than that. When you walk from like the lobby or from the common area in the hotel into the kitchen, you're walking from marble floors and gorgeous decor, and you open up and you look like you're in a prison the moment you walk into the work area. Because there's no nice marble, it's all ugly concrete and rough and tumble behind the scenes. But again, what you don't know, don't hurt you. That's what we learned from this Gemara. Zok tehel Gemara weiter. Zok tehel Mishnah. Hamoitzi chel. Now, how long is a string? If you take a string and you carry from Shus Yoch to Shus Rabin, how long does it have to be considered a significant string? Kedei lasas oizen lekupa. To be big enough to make a handle. A handle is referred to as an ear for a basket. Rashi says, what is a basket? Just to hold it, a handle for a basket. Gemi. What about gemi? Gemi is not rope. It's a softer type of rope, and he touches it as a reed grass. So it's not rope. It's not as rough. It's Kedei Lasos Talai Lenapel Kibur, to make a loop that you can hang the sifter or a sifter. A napa, I think, is a fine sifter. A cover is a more coarse type of string. Hudaimer Kedei Litel Mimenu Midas Minal Lakotim. It would be a rope that's long enough that you can measure the length of a child's foot, and then you could take the string and go to the shoemaker and say, I need a shoe that's this long. This long. Take the string. Like my wife every year goes to the tailor and she takes my suit and says, please give me the next size up. So it's something that you use to measure things. Would be a davar choshev, and therefore that rope is considered a davar choshev to carry. Niyar, what about paper? Kedei lichtov olav, enough that you can write on it, and we're going to see how much you have to be able to write on it. Kesher, that was wrong. Kedei lichtov olav kesher muchser, to be able to write on it the receipt that the customs would give you after you pay duty. And what is that? So Rashi, he pays his toll to go over the river. Or if he got an exemption, he would give him some type of document, a seal, to show customs that he's either fully paid or that he's exempt. And on this thing, he would make two large letters on it, and those two letters represented that he paid his muchas. Now, whenever you come in to Canada and you go through customs, they give you have the card that you fill out on the plane, and then you hand it in, and they always write two numbers on it. If you ever notice, when you go through immigration, they always write two numbers on it, and as you're going out of the airport with your luggage, you show them and they look at the numbers. We don't know what the numbers mean, but those numbers are codes to them, whether or not they want to rip us apart and find all of the things that we smuggled, or whether they're going to let us go through. That's when we say Levit Shasha, and we start Kapitel on the way. And we're hoping those two numbers are the right numbers, and we're looking at the other guy. What numbers did you get? To see if you got the good numbers or the bad numbers. So that's what this was. They actually wrote two numbers on a piece of paper, and that was a sign that you can go right through customs, just like we have today in Pearson. Now, V'amoitzi Kesher Muchsin Chai, and if someone takes this Kesher Muchsin and carries it with Shus HaYochel, Shus HaRabban, he will be chayiv for Hitzah. Zog the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Niyar Mochuk, how about you had a piece of paper that was once upon a time written on it, and it was rubbed out? And what's significant about that, Rashi says, is Shuv Ein Roy Lichtoi. Once you rubbed out stuff, you can't write it on it anymore because it's not good. It's not good paper. So therefore, this paper cannot be used to write on. So you need it, in order for it to be significant, it has to be larger to complete a different function. And that is Kedei Lichrech Al Tzluchis Ketana Shel Pleitum. Pleitum is balsam oil. It was that explosive, flammable stuff that we learned about a couple of weeks ago with a mother-in-law who told her daughter-in-law to pour balsam oil on herself, and then she told her to pull the pin out of the grenade because she loved her daughter-in-law, and her daughter-in-law went up in smokes. So this type of bottle, if you want to stop it up, a piece of paper that's big enough to be used as a bottle stopper for balsam oil, that gives it a cheshivas, and therefore it will be asur for itself. Or what about leather? Kedei lasis kameya, enough to make a kameya. Klaf, what about klaf that you could write on? Kedei lichtav alav parsha katana shebetzfilin shishma Yisrael. You have to have enough klaf that you could write on it a parsha of tefillin. Rashi says something interesting. The dawn of Yikar. So Rashi wants to know, to write a small parsha like Shema is a bigger piece than what you would need for a kameya. So why do you need a bigger piece of klaf if klaf is more chashuv? Zok Rashi, the idea dami v'karim le'avdu minei kshari muktzin. They would never use it, not for kameya. They would never use it for kshari muktzin. They would never write on a piece of klaf which is so valuable. They wouldn't use it as your customs document. The only thing they would use klaf for is al-tefillin and mezuzos. And therefore, when you're assessing what is the critical mass, a minimal amount of klaf, it has to be enough to write the parsha of Tanash Tefillin, which is Shema Yisrael, which is the smallest parsha of the parsha of Tefillin.
Could I ask a question?
Please.
Why shouldn't it be enough just to write two letters, which would be enough to be mechayiv you for ksiva?
so I believe that's really included in what Rashi's Kash is, and he's saying that in order for a piece of cloth to be valuable, it has to be a cloth of significance. And a cloth that's significant is only if you could write still and mezuzahs on it, because that's what it's made for. So you might be able to accomplish a malacha on that cloth with less, but that doesn't say that the cloth is a davar chashuv. The cloth only becomes a davar chashuv is if you can use it for what its typical purpose is. Okay. Diyoy, what about ink? Enough ink to write 2 oises. Kechoil, how about kechoil is some type of powder that they put on their eyes. Kedei likhoil ayin achas, to be able to treat one eye. Devek glue, kedei litin beroish hashavshev. It's something that you can put on the top of a shavshev, which Rashi tells us the Gemara is going to explain. Zephes, tar, the gophers and sulfur. Kedei lasos nekev shaiva. Kedei lasos nekev, to make a hole. And Rashi says, Rashi speaking about later, it's to cover a hole. I think the Arshko explains what type of hole it is. Let's see what it says over here. Enough to form a hole. So I believe Note 10 explains a little bit what this hole is. And he says, let's see if I can get to it with the camera. Yeah. Oh, he says it doesn't, he takes out the word cotton, and he says it's the Mishnah is referring to a small vial in which mercury was kept. The opening was sealed with pitch or sulfur, and a hole was made through the seal through which the mercury could be slowly removed. So basically, if they had mercury in a little bottle, and Rashi actually says this, if they had mercury in a bottle, what they would do is they didn't want the mercury to spill out, so they would cover the jug with this zephes and shaiva, which would act as a plug, and then they made a pinhole in it. And since it was only a pinhole, only one drop would come out at a time, and that's how they dispensed the mercury from this little jug. Okay, shaiva. How about wax? Wax is to put on a small hole to cover up, to cover a hole. Let's see what Rashi says. No, so Rashi's going here on the gophers. Shaiva means to cover a hole in a keli. Okay, let's see what else we have. Charosis. Charosis, Rashi is a broken brick, I believe. Rashi says, let's see what Rashi says it. Levena ksusha, a smashed block. Rashi says charosis kedei lasos pi kur shel tzarfezah. That's to make the opening of people who formed gold. Rashi says they used to blow their bellows there. So they put their bellows in there. So they made some border around this oven, so that when they blew into it with their bellows, it sealed and blew the air in. I don't know exactly how they formed gold, but there was some type of bellows that they forced air into it, and they put this wrapper, or they put this border, this edge around the crucible that they formed the gold in, that allowed the bellows to seal to the crucible. Of Yehuda Omer, kedei lasos pitput. In order to, it has to be enough charosis to patch up a tripod that they would put a pot on. If it broke, they had to make a tripod. If it broke, they would use this sid to repair it. Subin is like the bran, the psilus from wheat. Kedei litain al pikur shel tzarfezah. They would put this on the crucible where they formed gold. And Rashi said it was b'makom she'en pchamim, if they didn't have coals, so they needed heat, and they didn't have coals. So tzarfezah be'et shel subin, they actually used the fire of subin that was burning instead of coals if they didn't have it. Sid, how about cement? Kedei lasud ketam l'shabbavonis. What they used this cement for, they used it as like a waxing to take hair off. Rashi says, toif l'sid lahasar saseir. They would put sid, which actually had some acidic qualities, and they would smear it on their skin, and they would pull off all the hair. It would be sid that you could make a basket with. And if the Chemi they lost it undepi. So let's just see what these touches are. He touches over here. Oh no, I'm sorry. Hilk is not a basket. I apologize. I forgot. It's enough to make the hair on the temples lay flat. So they used it to put on the temples to put down, to flatten out the hair. And the Chemi says it's enough to smear on the forehead. So each shear is a little bit smaller than the next, and there's 3 shiurim of how much sid would be required to be considered a choshev amount of this sid. Zokeh the Gemara. Chevel nami l'chayv kidei lasos tloy l'napa l'chavra. The amount of rope that the Mishnah states you need to be mechayiv you is enough to hold lasos oizen kupa. Now that's more than the amount of gemi needed to create a hanger for the napan kivra. So, correct the Gemara, you can use the chevel to make a loop for the napan kivra. So why isn't a shorter piece of chevel choshev that you should have an isra on it? Zok the Heilige Gemara. The answer is even the charik b'mona le'avrinchi. A rope, like a twine type of rope, has strands that if you're hanging a keli on it and it's a heavier keli, it's going to make the strands from the rough rope dig in and actually damage the metal of the keli. And since people were concerned not to damage their keli by hanging them with these rough ropes, they only used gemi to hang them with so that they shouldn't get damaged. And that's why chevel, its only use is to make a handle for a basket, but not a smaller amount that they could have been used to make a hanger for these kelim, because it would damage those kelim. Taner Rabban, putzin. How many putzin are shalovi dekel? They're part of the palm tree. How much do you have to have for that? Kidei lasas oizen l'sal kafifa mitris. For a basket that's also made out of some part of the dekel. It's also mitzuri dekel. So putzin would be typically used to make a handle for this type of basket, and that's how much putzin you'd have to have. Acher noirim, kidei liten al pi mashkach kota of sieve. Sieve. Sieve is something that grows around the dekel. Rashi says, and it's a fabric. It's some type of growth that acts like a fabric. Vidila shegot of dekel kein malbush. It's almost like a fabric. The nichrach svivoisa of oila. It actually, it's like a vine. It grows around the dekel, but it's like a fabric. So how much of that is considered a critical amount? It's something that you would put onto a funnel, and if you were going to fill up a jug of wine through a funnel, you would put this over the funnel, and when you poured the wine in, it would only allow clear, pure wine to go in to the jug, and any pieces it would remove. So that's a use that's important, and that's why that amount of sieve is considered a davar choshev to be chayiv al tzeitzah. Revev is grease. Kidei losuch tachas asbegin taner. It's enough to smear under. Rashi says rekik shenoistin betaner betachen tachtov aliyah. What they would do is they would smear it if they wanted to put the way they used to bake is they used to make crackers or even breads. The way they used to bake is they used to take the bread and they used to adhere it to the side of the oven. So the smallest thing that they would bake would be an aspagan, which is a small cracker. And if they wanted to put a cracker and stick it to the side of the oven to bake, they would usually smear some grease on it so that it would be easy to pull it off the wall of the oven. So the amount of grease that you would need to smear on this cracker so that you could get it off the side of the oven, that would be the amount. Now, how much is that? The chamishur bis kisela. The shear of I think it means the size of this cracker. The size of this cracker would be the shear of the sela, and that's how much oil or grease you would need to smear it with, and therefore that amount of grease would be also to carry it. In fact, the Gemara about Tanya Kigrodros, we learned the Brisa that it says that it's the shear of Kigrodros. So Gemara, you're right. Idi chachira. The size of a sela or the size of this cracker was also the size of the Kigrodros. Chachur. Muchen, what about cotton or any other type of substance that's like cotton? How much would you need for it to be a serious amount? To make a small ball with it. If you can make a cotton ball, that's what cotton ball means. It's a kader ktana, a cotton ball. It's a small ball. So a cotton ball is the amount of cotton that would aser you to carry. The chamishiroi kegos, and what is the small ball? What is a cotton ball? A cotton ball is the shear of a walnut. Nior, paper, k'dei lichtov alav kasher muchsin, enough paper to write on it the receipt that you get when you pay duty. Tana, we learned. Kama kesher muchsin, how many letters are written on the kesher muchsin? Shtei oisios, 2 oisios, and here we have to get a different girsa. The article actually, it's not in the Bach, but the article brings a different girsa. So we're talking about the size of the oisios that you write on the kesher muchsin, it's shtei oisios, and the article sticks in over here. B'chsav Yevani. So it's not just regular oisios, it's chsav Yevani, and he says Greek script, which is larger than common Hebrew lettering. So the letters that you write on the kesher muchsin are larger. So they're larger, they're 2 large letters. Or a mini fractal gemara. If you carry out an empty piece of paper, if it's big enough that you can write 2 oisios on it, and this is standard oisios. It doesn't say here oisios yevonis. It's standard oisios. Chayiv imla potter. So how could it be the brisa earlier says you have to write 2 big oisios, yet this brisa says 2 regular oisios. Amar Psheshes, my shtei oisios, what does the brisa mean in the second brisa? And shtei oisios, it also means shtei oisios so kesher muchsin. It doesn't mean 2 standard oisios. It means 2 oisios that you would find on the customs receipt, which in fact are oisios and ksav. That's the first case. Rav Amar, shtei oisios tidam. No, when it's talking about a piece of paper and it says you only need to be able to write 2 oisios on it, in fact it means just 2 oisios, standard oisios, small oisios. So oibazoi it's schwer because that's a smaller shear than the earlier brisa that says you have to be able to write oisios yevanios. So the Gemara, what it means is the oisios kedon ubeis achiza. Not only when it says in the second brisa you need a piece of paper that's large enough to write 2 oisios on it, it's 2 oisios and a blank space beside it, so someone can hold on to the piece of paper that has the oisios written on it without covering over the oisios, a little bit of an extra margin. So 2 oisios and a little bit of extra margin to hold it is exactly the same size as 2 big oisios without any margin. So now we have 2 pshatim. We have 2 pshatim in what the brisa means. Either it means oisios yevanios, which are big oisios, or it means 2 regular sized oisios with extra place on the paper to hold on to. You found a piece of paper that's rubbed out, or a star perua, or a star choiv that's already paid off. So again, it's of no use. So what happened is you carried this rishus l'shus. You took a piece of paper that had writing on it that was rubbed out, and you carried that paper from rishus yachid to rishus rabin. Or alternatively, if someone took a star that was already paid off and he carried it from rishus yachid to rishus rabin. So how big does this have to be in order for it to be an Isra? Zok Brisa, im yesh beloivin shaloi, if there's enough clear white paper that had never yet been written on, so now you could fill that in. And how much space is there? Kedei lichtov shtei oisios. So there's one of 2 things will make this paper big enough that it has Isra. A, if it's enough that you could write 2 letters on it, or B, or if the whole paper can be used as a bottle stopper, that gives it a chashivus. Then it's chayiv. So we're not going to focus on the second shear. We're going to focus on the big shear. What it says here, if you have a piece of a star, so star is a big piece of paper, but there's only a small little area on it that's blank. Or you have a niyor mochut, which you can't write on, but there's a certain small area of it that's still virgin, that's still pristine, that you can write 2 letters on. That will be enough to give it a chashivas to me b'chayv. Fracting one. Bishul le'Rab Sheshes. Domer mai shtei oisi shall kesher muchsin shaper. According to Rab Sheshes, who holds that both brises hold that the amount of space you need on the paper to make it valuable is to be able to write two big oisios. So we'll fartaich, the same way we fartaich this brisa, as shtei oisios means two big oisios, we'll fartaich this brisa, that shtei oisios are two big oisios. But if you fartaich this brisa, that it means two oisios and extra paper to grab it with, over here, Zok Gemara, since it's a whole big star, you don't need any extra paper to grab it with, because you can grab it on the place where it was written previously, or you can grab it on the place where it was rubbed out. So Zok Gemara, beautiful. That fits it perfectly here. The two oisios that the brisa means is regular oisios, but you need extra white space around it to hold on to. These, the rubbed out star, the rubbed out paper in the star, you don't need to leave extra blank space on it to grab, because you can grab it from the place where it's written. So Ibazoi, it's not the same shear. Dr. Merkasha, you have a kasha there. Dr. Marvati, Tanarabani, Hamoti Kesher Muksin. If someone made a saw on this star, on this receipt that he got from customs, until he went through the gate. So if you have this paper from immigration, you didn't go through the gate, so you still needed to get out of the gate. Chayiv, you're chayiv, because it's very valuable, you need to hold on to it. But but once you've already shown it, now it's useless, this is a useless piece of paper, putter, because it loses any value that it might have. Rabbi Yehuda says, even after you showed it already, chayiv, you're still chayiv, because you still need it. You'll still need it for some purpose. My beinai, what is the machlokes, and exactly what does Rabbi Yehuda mean that I might need it for something? What will I need it for? Amar Abaye, ika beinayu rihiti muksa. Rashi tells us that they had these people that they would send them, even after you passed through customs, they would send these people to pursue the people who already left customs and harass them and say, did you pass customs? If you didn't, I'm taking you back. So if you had that paper still, you could show this police officer that they sent, no, I went through fair and square. I have my receipt. And that's what Rabbi Yehuda holds. That's why I need it. But the Tanakama holds that I wouldn't bother showing them that paper. I wouldn't bother keeping that paper. It's not choshev. And if the guy runs after me, I'll go back and I'll get harassed and I'll clear customs again. But I'm not going to save that paper. Rav Amar Muchas Gadol or Muchas Katan. There's a different chiluk. Muchas Katan is, Rashi tells us, sometimes there's a bridge and they're very badly backed up. There's a long line for customs. If you ever traveled to New York, sometimes you can wait a long time. There's a long line. And the head toll collector, the head guy in customs, he doesn't want to be bothered with such a long thing, with such a long wait and so much work. So he would appoint his underlings to take care of it. So that was called the Muchas Katan. So Rashi tells us, he's not interested in standing all day by the Rainbow Bridge asking him if you have any alcohol or tobacco products. Therefore, Muchas Katan, he hires the schlepper customs guys that we have to run into. This guy is a Jewish guy. When he comes to customs, they ask him, can I see your passport? I say, are you a supervisor? No, I'm not showing you my passport. I want to speak to a supervisor. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he needs this receipt so that the Muchas Katan should let him go through. Even though I don't have a receipt, the Muchas Gadol will, when I pass through the Muchas Gadol, he's going to give me some type of code. And if I say that code to the Muchas Katan, he'll let me go through and I don't have to show my receipt. So there's a machlokes whether or not I have to show my receipt. I'm not sure exactly if it's a machlokes in Metzias, or it could be some people keep their receipt, some people don't, and not enough people keep their receipt and make it a davar choshev. Okay, so that's another chiluk. Rav Ashi Amar Chad Muchas Ika Benayu. even if there's only one muchas, there's still a machlokes whether or not people would hold on to their custom receipt. You know why? Imagine if you always pay your duty and you keep your receipts of the duties, and then one day you come to customs and he asks you, do you have anything to declare? And you say no. He says, you say you have nothing to declare? I want you to pull over to the side, we're going to check you out. And you tell him, why don't you trust me? Let me show you what I have in my glove compartment. And you pull out a stack of receipts from customs. Look, every time I go through, I declare whatever I have and I pay duty. So if today I'm not declaring anything, trust me. So a person will actually hold on to his useless custom receipts to be able to demonstrate in the future to a customs official that he's an honest guy and he declares what he's supposed to, and the proof is in the pudding. He has all the receipts from his previous encounters with customs. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. Tanu Rabban.
Yes, what does it mean? Yes, what does it mean? Chad muchas ikminai. What does that do with chad muchas?
It means even if he didn't go, even if he's not going through multiple customs, he only went through customs once. So then why is he holding his receipt? Who's he showing it to? That's it. He's gone. He's out of the airport.
A different one.
So it means he wants to keep his receipts. So if he ever goes
I know.
through customs
It hasn't fit into the words. Muchas sheni means a different one who was not there.
A different one at a different time. So
Okay.
if you look at Rashi, Lemucha Sheni, shel maver acher, of a different border. He's not going to use this receipt to show that he paid already, because this is going to be at a different time when he travels a different time. He just wants to show, anytime he goes through customs, he wants to show that he's a guy who always declares what he has. He never wants people to come after him.
Just a losh and chad muchas ikminai. I wouldn't mean chad muchas. Nothing good, but just the next one.
No, it means he's not planning to. He doesn't have multiple gates to clear. He doesn't have multiple authorities to clear. He only has one desk to clear. So until now, we were talking about he had multiple desks to clear, so he needed his receipt to clear all the different desks of customs. But here we're speaking of a guy who only had one desk to clear and he cleared it. So why would he hold on to it? He's holding on to it for the future. Basically, what this is a nexus card. His stack of receipts was a nexus card. We have nexus cards, right? Basically, we're showing that we went through customs and they checked us out and they won't trust us.
Okay.
What if someone takes a shtar chayv and he carries it out reshus l'shus? So we're assuming it's a malva. The malva has a chayv. It says on the star that Reuben owes this guy money. Reuben owes Shimon money. So Shimon has this star. It's very valuable. It's his only way to get paid back. If he carries that reshus l'shus, he's going to be chayv. Okay, Misha Paran. What if it's already paid off? So it's a useless piece of paper. Potter is potter. Okay, the Gemara is going to explain why. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af Misha Paran, even if it's already paid off, chayiv, I need this star, even though it was already paid off. So we need to understand what it's all about. Why does it need a star and why does it not? So Gemara, my beinai, what is the svara? What is the explanation of this machlokes between the Tanakam and Rabbi? Amar Yosy, the machlokes is osur lishois star purah ikubinai. If you're a malva and you have a star that your loiva already paid you up, are you allowed to retain that star? Rabbanan sabri osur lishois star purah. Rabbanan hold you're not allowed to retain that star. You have to get rid of it. And since you have to get rid of it, therefore it's useless. And therefore you're not chayiv. However, Rabbi Yehuda Savar, mutar l'shois star purah. You're allowed to hold on to it. And since you're allowed to hold on to it, you might be able to use it. You might be able to use it to put to use as a bottle stopper. And therefore, it has a chshivus of a bottle stopper. So if you're not allowed to save the star, you have to destroy it, and it has no use, and therefore you're potter. But if you could keep it, therefore, if it has a use as a bottle stopper, you're going to be chayav. That's the first pshat. Abai would say no. The chula alma, everybody would agree. Osir lishois star purah. You're not allowed to retain a star that's paid up. You have to get rid of it right away. But v'hacha, here we're talking about a star that's not purah. We're actually talking about a star that's not paid up. Now you're going to ask me, Akasha, how could I say that it's speaking about a star that's not paid up if the Brisa specifically says mishaparai potter? Have you done and I'm touching this that you didn't pay it yet? Good kasha. We're going to get there in a second. But Abaye wants to say, Duchul alma osher lishoy shtar pura, and here it's a star that's not paid up yet. So why should it be? So if it wasn't paid up yet, for sure it's choshev. If it's for sure choshev, what's the svar of it from the Kama who says it's potter? We're speaking about somebody who has a star, but he has no edim to be mekayim the star. So the only way he'll be able to collect on this star is if the loive is moida that this is a valid star. So we have a star that the loive was moida on it and it's a valid star. But the loive says, it's a valid star, but I paid you already. So there's a machloikis in Bava Kama. If I have a star, so Reuben has a star that says Shimon owes him $1,000, and Shimon said that star is a true star, but I paid you back. So there's a machloikis if moed the star shekos a charchel kaima. Do you say once the loiv is moed to the star, now I could run with it or not? So basically, the shaila here is the star that I have. Is it a good star that I could collect on, or is it a bad star that I cannot collect on? Tanakama sover moed the star shekos a charchel kaima. The Tanakama holds that even though Shimon agrees that the star was good, I can't collect with it. So if I can't collect with it, it's a useless piece of paper. If it's a useless piece of paper and I carry it outside, I'm potter. Rabbi Yehuda Sover, moed b'shtar shekosvay ein tzarich l'kaimay. I actually could collect on it. If I could collect on it, it's a very, very choshev piece of paper, and that's why I'm chayiv. Frek the Gemara, umay acheloi paray, umisha paray. The Brisa distinguishes between if he didn't pay back and if he did pay back. Now, how could you say we're talking about a case of a person with a star that he's trying to collect on if the Brisa says Misha Parai, he paid already? So what does it mean, Misha Parai? Zok the Heli Gemara. It means Achiyomer Loive Paraiti Veloy Paraiti. So if we look back into the Brisa and we try to read the words of the Brisa, it reads like this. If you carry a star chayvat, it was not paid off yet, and it's a good bona fide star. Chayv. But misha paray, if it's a star that you cannot be mekayim, and it's only a good star because Shimon said it's a star, but Shimon also claims that he paid already, then the Tanakama holds it's potter because you cannot claim with it, and Yehuda says that you could claim with it, and therefore you're going to be chayv.
Yosy, doesn't he give him back the star once he pays the debt?
That's going to come into play right now. But here we're talking about, so far we're talking about a star that was not paid up yet. So it actually belongs by the Malva. Now we're going to get into, this next surah till the two dots is going to be discussing about giving the star back. That's what we're going to discuss right now. Rav Amar, Rav says, to Chula Alma, everybody agrees, Moed b'shtar shekosvay shetzorech l'kaimoy. Everybody holds that moed b'shtar shetzorech l'kaimoy, which meaning that it's not a good star, and he cannot collect on it. But v'hacha, here we're speaking about the koisvin shoiber committal. The shaila is koisvin shoiber. Now, what happens if the Malva has a star, right? And this is exactly what Moshe Stern brought up. What if the Malva has a star that Shimon owes him $1,000, and then the Malva lost the star? The Malva lost the star, and Shimon says, "Yeah, I owe you $1,000. You give me the star back, and I'll give you $1,000. Don't expect me to pay you if you don't give me the star, because I know what's going to happen. I'm going to pay you $1,000. You're going to find your star in a month, and you're going to come after me again. That's not a good deal." So there's a shita that holds that the Malva can say, no, you got to pay me anyway. You're afraid that I'm going to come collect again? I'm going to write you out a receipt that you paid. But the lawyer can say, I don't want the receipt because now I have to worry about holding on to that receipt. I have to take out a safety deposit box and I have to save that receipt because if I lose it, heaven forbid, you're going to come after me again. So the shaila is, if the Malva lost the star, can you force the lawyer to pay him back and to accept the receipt? Or could the lawyer say, no, I will not do it that way. I'm not going to pay you until I get my star back. So Tanakama suffer, koisvin shoiber. The Tanakama holds that you write a receipt. Rabbi Yehuda suffer and koisvin shoiber. So Rashi explains very, very beautifully. So Rashi says as follows: Vachikamar, Mishapare loiva, vahitzioi malva the loiva. So here it's talking about a case where the loiva paid already. So the loiva paid back, and he didn't yet get the star. But the loiva has a right to compel the malva to give him that star. So here you have a case where the loiva paid, he didn't get the star, and he didn't get the receipt yet. So I guess they were still handling. So he did pay. So Mishapari loiva, but malva b'Shabbos. The malva is still holding on to the star because he did. I guess what happened was the loiva paid the malva because the malva said he didn't have the star, and then maybe on Shabbos the malva found the star somewhere, and he carried it on Shabbos. Malva b'Shabbos, the malva will be potter, because the malva doesn't need the star. You might say the malva needs the star. The amrit kiven de royu lotra pitzluchusai, who the boy adur leloiva leimashulei shemeyavil de malva b'yachshavitfen. He has to give it back. He has to give it back to the loiva because otherwise the loiva is afraid. Otherwise the loiva is afraid that the malva is going to come after him again. Vinami loima had malva, but if he doesn't give it back to the malva, lo yichbes the loiva, the malva kosav loiva sharverly. So if the malva is going to eventually write up a receipt, and the loiva will have to accept the receipt, then the star has no chashivas. The star has no chashivas to anybody, and therefore it'll be potter. But the Yehuda sover ain't kaishin shofar. You can't write a shofar. The Rabbi Yehuda holds that since the loiva does not have to accept the receipt, the malva knows that he has to find that receipt. Bezin compelled the loiva for whatever reason to pay the malva, even though the malva couldn't present his star. Now the malva found the star. The malva knows that he has to get that star back to the loiva, because if he doesn't get the star back to the loiva will be able to go back to Bezin and say, you know what, I paid him my $1,000, but I want the money back because he didn't give me the star. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, just because the malva got lucky and the loiva paid him, even though the loiva didn't have to, the loiva will come back after the malva and say, if you can't locate the star within 2 or 3 days, I want my money back. So the malva, if he finds that star, he needs that star. That star is very choshev, because without that star, he's going to have to refund the loiva's payment. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, that makes it a choshev star. But according to the Chacham, according to the Tanakama, I don't have, even if the loiva comes after me for the star, I don't have to give it to him. I can write him a receipt and he won't be able to come after me. And therefore, that star is not choshev to him at all, and therefore he just has to destroy it, and therefore he's going to be potter if he carries it. So that was the Svar of Rabbah. The Chulama Moedi V'Shar the Tzarech L'Kaimoi, and again the malva has the star, but if he can't get away with the receipt, that star is choshev to him. And therefore the malva does not have to give this star back to the loiva, and therefore he'll just destroy it, so it's not choshev. If we discover in kosher shover, the loiva will come after him and get a refund unless he gives him the star back, and therefore it's choshev to the malva. Rav Ashi is a departure from all of the pshatim, and Rav Ashi says that we're talking about a paid off star, and in fact the loiva has it. The loiva paid, and it's the loiva we're talking about. So up until now, all the pshatim were that the malva carried the star out from Rishus Yach to Rishus Rabbah. Rav Ashi holds speaking about a paid off choiv, and the loiva got a star. And the question is, the loiva carried this star out of his Rishus on Shabbos. The question is, if the loiva got the star back, is he going to just destroy it, and then it's not choshev, and therefore if the loiva walked out from Rishus Yach to Rishus Rabbah, he'll be potter, or maybe the loiva will actually hold on to his paid stars, even though it's dangerous for him, because if he loses it and the malva finds it, the malva could collect again, but the star is very useful to him. You know why? Because the next time he needs to borrow money from somebody, he can go over to Benzi Friedman and say, Benzi, I need to borrow $100,000. You're worried I won't pay you back? Look, I have the star from Josh Frankel. I paid him back when I borrowed $100,000, so I'll pay you back too. So you could lend me $100,000. So the star is valuable to the loiva. He wants to hold on to it because it will show that he will pay back. Therefore, it's valuable to the loiva. Someone told me that many years ago, Moti first knows the story. He was borrowing money. Mr. Shachachevsky used to lend money to people who needed to borrow. So there was a younger man that we know that's not a younger man anymore, and he went to Mr. Shachachevsky to borrow money to buy a house. So when he went to Mr. Shachachevsky pulls out a book. He pulls out a book, and he's going to write down to record the loan. So the Chingaman tells Mr. Shechachevsky, "Oh, Mr. Shechachevsky, medei bich is the rangan and Ganaiten. With this book, you'll get into Ganaiten." So Mr. Shechachevsky says, "Are you kidding me? This is just a small book. These are the bich from Tzulas, from those who paid back. Let me bring an andere bich." And he brought out this big, massive book and says, "These are the bich from nicht Tzulas, from de bich the rangan and Ganaiten. These are saying blaben in jene bich from the Tzulas and nicht in the bich from the nicht Tzulas." So that's exactly the star we're talking about. The star to show ich bin in the bich from the Tzulas.
Shkoyach.
Oh, what time are we learning tomorrow?
Yeah, the Rav asked me about Hallel for tomorrow. So we have two options. We can learn regular time, 7:20, and then finish at 8 o'clock so we can have Hallel at 8:30.